We started applying it in companies. We saw balance sheets improve. We started seeing sales double, triple, in some cases, 10 times sales within a few years. So we knew that we had ran into something. And that's when I started having a fan club of tens of thousands of CEOs wanting to keep up with this research. And we've tested it. We ended up, fortunately had CEOs that were, kind enough to let us test these elements in their companies. So it was a good partnership. And I've just ran into some of the most amazing people, and I hope to continue doing that.
Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life, to wake up energized, excited about the day, to have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want, to be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Today's quote is from M. Scott Peck. The truth is that our finest moments are most likely to occur when we are feeling deeply uncomfortable, unhappy, or unfulfilled. For it is only in such moments, propelled by our discomfort, that we are likely to step out of our ruts and start searching for different ways for truer answers. I find that to be very true. When you're uncomfortable, well, you get the motivation to step up, hopefully. Greatness often comes from discomfort and finding a better way. In today's episode, we're going to discuss some uncomfortable and hard truths about leadership and strategy. The good news is you can learn these powerful lessons without going through the hardship yourself if you're willing to learn from others. As I always say, the most important things we should learn are rarely taught in school or even in business. Our guest today is Don Schmincke, and he has spent a lifetime across various disciplines and working with some of the brightest minds to uncover wisdom that challenges conventional beliefs and leadership strategy. Let's learn from him and welcome him to the show. Welcome to Richer Soul, Don Schmincke. It's great to have you join us today.
Great. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to learn from you, and I've got some burning questions, but we always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
We didn't have any, so we learned a lot.
Well, most people who don't have money don't learn about money.
You learn how to survive, how to get it. And it's funny, I do expeditions around the world, and usually remote regions where money has different meanings. And the happiest countries seem to be those that don't have money. And I couldn't figure out why the anthropologists and the sociologists who were measuring happiness were finding these patterns. But it was interesting. I remember being in a lost civilization. It was a deep part of the Himalayas. And it was the Sherpas, would take us through these regions because they're trying to get to these villages. There's no roads. I mean, you're basically climbing and descending into valleys. And somebody had a magazine. It was one of the American magazines, and they were showing them where we live and how our society was and our nice these in New York, like New York City, for example, or our healthcare system, or our, the rockets that we're sending into space. And somebody asked, "Wouldn't you want to come visit us? Would you like to live here?" Because they were living in a society where I think they made $200 a year. And they said, "No, I don't think I want to." And so I said, "Why not?" I said, "Well, look at your faces. You all look so unhappy." And I looked at this and I was like, "Oh my God, we look miserable." Meanwhile, over there, everybody's like smiling and dancing and enjoying themselves. I'm looking at these pictures like, "Oh, wow, I look awful." So they were looking at our faces, not all of our wealth. That didn't matter. What's the sense of having a wealth when you're miserable? So anyway, so the point is, money has a different meaning depending on where you are in the world. And certainly, I realize that in this country, we have to have it to have food and shelter and clothing. But sometimes when it starts owning us, it starts sapping our happiness, and then it'd be a shame to be born and human, but die attached to money.
The original tagline for the podcast was, "You got rich, now what?" Because it didn't give you what you wanted, right? Right. All right, you got the money. Now what are you going to do?
And I still want money. I mean, there's all kind of research I want to fund. I'm still recovering from one of the worst divorces in America. And so, money's good. I would like to make as much as I can. There's much more I want to do with it. But then again, I don't want to be so attached to it to where I can't think and I can't take risks and learn.
Do you think money prevents people from taking risks?
Yeah, it depends. It's hard to categorize it with such a broad stroke, but some people may feel unsafe and now want to take risks, but others, like entrepreneurs, for example, they take a lot of risks very easily. And, they'll go bankrupt multiple times. So it depends on who you're talking to.
We all have our own financial mindsets and makeups. And I have noticed, and you are very correct, entrepreneurs seem to have very high risk tolerance for making those types of decisions. I don't know if it's that they just don't understand the math of what they're doing, or if they just have such an internal belief in their success that they don't think twice about it. And actually, we're going to talk about some of those concepts as it relates to mountain climbing, because I think there's a lot to learn from what you learned on the mountain, but there's a lot of craziness too, in a sense. But before we get to the mountain climbing, so you didn't grow up with a lot of money, but you ended up at MIT.
Yeah, right.
How'd that happen?
Working my ass off, taking out a lot of loans, which weren't forgiven. So
you went into, is it planetary physicist?
Yeah, I had a number of things when I, I almost dropped out of high school, so I wasn't really supposed to go, further than the rock bands I was playing at the time. But the police told me I had to finish my senior year. Otherwise, I had to
was that the band or the actual police?
At least it was the band. But I'd get back to school, finish your senior year. I said, "How much time do I have to get?" They get like 90 days. So I literally did the whole year in 90 days. And so I was working at my uncle's gas station, and I noticed all the fancy cars are driven by people with education. So I thought, I should get an education. So I went to a community college up the street, and they didn't care whether I showed up or not because, they had my money. So I thought, well, this is interesting. But a couple people there had been out of Cambridge, and was an MIT professor who had retired. He was just having fun teaching. And they said, "You should apply." And I didn't know what it was. I don't know if it was a trade school or what the hell it might be. So I went through a battery of testing, a lot of testing. And I got in. And so all of a sudden, by this point now, I'm saturated with the ability to learn. And I was really inspired by that. So I got involved with planetary physics, but I was also involved with, double E and AI and all that stuff in the early days. I made money, automating the Harvard MIT biomedical lab, and I did some work on the guidance system for the Trident missile system. I was just an intern. I was just hanging out with some brilliant people and learning a lot. So I did a lot of that. I mean, all this research was going on for me, and it was a guy with ADHD, so it explains a lot of why I was involved in 4 or 5 different scientific disciplines at once. But it was studying humans that started getting my focus, and that's when I went to Hopkins, and I finished my graduate work there and started teaching at Johns Hopkins, and I got attached to the executive MBA program. And that led me into looking at why management theory was failing at such a high rate. And Oxford University gave me permission to use an ancient manuscript that they had written 700 years ago to train managers in samurai tradition. So I published that, became a bestseller. Next thing you know, I'm on CNN, a lot of the press, and I started speaking to CEO groups, and that helped me fund more research. So I made enough money I left Hopkins and started funding my own research and my own expeditions. And so I guess I've trained about 30,000 CEOs in these techniques, and we've doubled and tripled the size of companies using these scientific, biologically driven models. And I train about 700 companies a year now in it. It's been fun. I love learning. I love teaching. And that's what I do. And as long as I can make enough money to keep learning and teaching, I'll keep doing that.
Well, to speak to and teach that many CEOs in and of itself is a major accomplishment, not to mention going to MIT and other top-notch schools. And I still struggle with a lot of those schools, and depending on the degrees, but that's for another day. You've also scaled a lot of mountains, and I mean literally mountains. How did you get into mountain climbing?
I had to get somewhere. Some of these expeditions, you have to get somewhere. And if the regions are inside mountainous regions, you end up having to scale. Like in the Himalayas, if you're traversing certain villages, you're going to be having to summit passes that are going to be 16, 17,000 feet. But Chris Warner is really the real climber. I climb when I have to, but he's a brilliant, probably the top rescue climber in the world, and he runs an incredible company of fabulous climbers. And so I met him climbing in the Andes, and that's when I had this idea, like, let's do a book together, because NBC was going to film him on K2, his next K2 expedition. So we left that climbing expedition, and he went on to K2. I went back to my living room and started writing, and we had a satellite phone. So that's how it worked out. I really admire climbers that enjoy the sport, and they have the technique and the caring for people that they're responsible for. But then again, as you see in the book, there's a lot of climbers that shouldn't be on a mountain. But it's just one of those sports where that happens.
And that was kind of eye-opening about some of the stories that you shared in the book about different mountain climbers. But also what was even just as eye-opening is how dangerous the sport is. And I've been dying to ask 2 different questions. The first is, why do people, I forget the odds, but the odds of death are double digits. So, and you told many stories of people who have died on the mountain. Why would people risk their life for something like that?
Chris and I talked about that, and he knows a lot more climbers than I do, because I'm, like I said, I'm in the periphery as a researcher. But I think it's a cross section of humanity. I mean, some people are there because they're testing themselves, or they are having an inner experience, or they want to push themselves past their limits. Some people are there for the sport because they just enjoy it and they love it. Some people are there for the ego. They want to be able to say, hey, I climbed this mountain. Maybe some people are running for something. If you just take a cross-section of humanity, you'll see all the reasons in this sport. Generally, the good guides, though, like Chris and his teams are, they're there for the love of the sport and the ability to lead others to make it as safe as possible and as enjoyable as possible. But it's not really a fun sport. I mean, in terms of you're not comfortable. If you like walking up steps for a week, that's probably a great sport for you. I don't like walking up steps. But I remember taking some, I think it was the Himalayas. I was taking a bunch of pictures, and I came home. I was married at the time, and these pictures were up on the wall one day. I'm like, wow, there's a beautiful, where did you get those shots? And she said, you took them. And I was like, oh, because at that time, I mean, you're having trouble breathing, you're exhausted, you're at altitude, and sometimes you're freezing. So you're not thinking about, wow, what a beautiful scene this is.
It's funny because you climb to the top of the mountain and you don't have time to enjoy it. Because by the time you get there, you literally have to turn around and hustle out.
Yeah, I mean, there's an area of death zone environments. Like I've been to just shy of 20,000 feet. Chris has been up to 29, so because he's been to Everest, K2, and all that. And the death zones, you do have to get out of there. Otherwise, you cut the oxygen off to the brain. I mean, it's really what's going on. If you were in an emergency room and you had that level of oxygen deprivation, they'd be rushing you in an emergency situation. But mountain climbing is sort of, I try to get used to it and acclimate to it. But like I said, it's you do have to get down. You're up there and it feels good to have summited, especially when it's so physically grueling. And those climbs have done far more than I'll ever do. And I just admire that. Some without oxygen. Some people say that's causing brain issues now. But yeah, it's like any goal, I think. At a sport level, it's a goal to be achieved, but it could do the same thing if you're swimming. If you want to break a certain record, if you want to, or tennis, let me pick a sport. It's just one that requires a lot of physical, I guess, endurance and risk.
Well, and I think that's the part. I don't know how many people die swimming. I'm thinking the percentage is very low, Whereas as you're reading the story, there's mountain climbers all over the top of the mountain. And I expected a higher level of a code of ethics, but it sounded like in the book that code of ethics is not universal to everybody.
No, it was a good laboratory, not only climbing with Chris, but also being on satellite phone with him as we were writing this book, doing Take K2. It all comes out. It's a good magnifier. It's a good magnifier for human behavior. And as I'm studying biological leadership, it became one of those laboratories to let me see how we lead as humans. Because at that level, when you're in a death zone environment, you don't care about motivational speakers or best-selling books. I mean, you're just trying to stay alive. So as I was studying the biology of us as a species and how we lead, it all came out. I mean, some people rise to greatness, some people don't. And that's why in the book we saw, the fear can overtake you, or selfishness. I mean, some people are very unselfish. Some people, it was, hey, if I got to die, but I can save myself by you dying, you're going to die. That's not everybody, but like you see those moments. And then there's arrogance. There's cowardice. There's people seeking comfort at the expense of others. It was a neat, I think, effective observation of us as a species. But out of it, we can see some things, in terms of how to overcome some of those biological elements. And that's where the book idea came from. We didn't know what we were going to discover. We were writing the book alive in this experiment. We had no idea.
So we'll dig into that in a little bit. But the question I have is, are there markers or are there signals that would allow you to determine if somebody had certain traits, or do you just need to watch them under pressure? In other words, if I'm going to, for lack of a better word, if I'm going to pick someone to be the CEO, or if I'm going to pick someone to be a friend, is there a way to tell how they're going to behave under pressure and which of those characters are going to come out? Or do you just have to wait, watch, and observe, or look at their past history?
That's interesting because we use a lot of this when we look at executive development. Certainly simulating a situation to see how people react is a good way to see how they're going to react in a pressure situation. But history also allows you to see that as well. And I think looking at how people have behaved under stress situations in the past may give an indicator of how they'll be in the future. I know when Chris selects climbers to be on his team, he's looking for, if you think you're the greatest climber in the world, I can't use you. You know what I mean? You have to be on a team. You have to work with others. You have to be wanting to have those principles or those ethics to help us work together. And in the book, you could see arrogant climbers. They're literally putting other people at risk. And those are the ones you don't want to hang out with too long, especially on an expedition. So seeing how people react under pressure, but also seeing their history are probably two ways of trying to understand, who is this person and can I count on them? Because, like the old saying you can't see if there's a good captain on a ship until you hit the rough waters, until you hit the storms, and it's hard to be in a harbor and say, oh, you're a good captain, because harbors weren't built for good captains, as the open sea was. So as we go and look, in fact, my next book coming out, we did get into a lot of this. In fact, the workshops that I do, there's an element there that CEOs wanted me to keep in the workshop, and that was to see how to predict, and this is another dimension entirely, the levels of strategic thinking. And some of the work of Dr. Elliot Jacks, who did some great psychological work at Johns Hopkins, is he uncovered this mental complexity capacity in the brain. It had nothing to do with intelligence, had nothing to do with EQ, but it had to be, what I'm starting to call it now is, do you have a capacity to figure it out, to take a complex situation and figure it out? It's that complex thinking piece. So in one sense, I could say, to answer your question, an executive has to have a high level of that. If they don't have a high level of that, they won't be able to look out 3 to 5 years onto the horizon and think strategically. They won't be able to see trends that are long-term. They won't be able to figure out a complex situation and put it into action. And so there are things that we do know about the biology of humans now where we can discern, like, who would have a good executive capacity. But then you still have to test it. You still have to simulate. You still have to watch and observe. Interesting.
All right. One last question about the mountain.
Okay.
How come the Sherpa doesn't get any respect? They go up and down the mountain all the time, and yet they're not the hero.
Oh, well, those of us climbing with Sherpas, they get a lot of respect. Lots. A lot of respect. I think the Sherpa Union just doesn't have a good PR campaign. That's the problem. They need to get a better PR agency so they get more commercial time. For people in the industry, it really is, it's a job, it's a dangerous job, but it's what they do. They do a great job at it. And it's probably like those unsung heroes we have all the time. The first responders, the military, the people that are out there, and they don't get all the press, but boy, we need them.
We do. it's kind of a metaphor for life. You know, we're all climbing mountains and everybody needs a good Sherpa to help them along the way and get them to where they're going. And most of the Sherpas don't carry anywhere near the gear that the climbers do they? In the sense of they don't need that. Do they climb lighter, so to speak, or?
Well, generally, it depends on the condition. When we're going through different mountain passes, we have animals that are transporting heavy gear forward, and so that's that. When you're stocking different base camps and different levels of camps, somebody has to take all that stuff up, and those are usually the guys, help making sure that it's up there. But yeah, they're carrying a lot, and maybe not at the same time you are because they've already done a lot of the work. I've seen Sherpas with double packs because somebody wasn't on the trek, wasn't able to. They were having problems, physical issues, so they just put another pack on, and they just keep going.
I think we need to give them a little bit more recognition for their climbing the mountain too. So what was the reason behind the book? What inspired you guys to write it?
We had finished summiting Cotopaxi down in Ecuador, and we were, which is was like the highest active volcano in the world, which is kind of stupid to be climbing an active volcano. It's blown up since then, so I don't know what's left at the top of where I was standing. But it was that point where I thought, I'm doing all these funding of these expeditions and these excursions to study ancient civilizations, but also remote cultures, to learn about leadership and how to grow companies faster. And that's when I had this idea, because I knew he was going to do the NBC summit for K2. And we thought, well, let's do it. Let's do this thing. And so we put together an idea for the concept. And then he took off, and we had a satellite phone connection and began to collect data. And he was filming. In fact, I think it was nominated for 11 Emmy Awards, the film that came out on the K2 with NBC. So we had tons of, hundreds of hours of footage, thousands of hours of footage, plus our own content exchange. But that was it. It was just a research. He was going to do it anyway, but together it became a great research project for developing a book and teaching from it.
And I very much did enjoy the book and quite a bit of learning from it. You've called it, is it biological leadership?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, it came out of failure rates, basically. When I was at Hopkins in the graduate school, a lot of executives in the MBA programs there were kind of complaining about the failure rate of management theory. And, we get all these best-selling books, but implementation was lagging. People were struggling. Most bankrupt companies had their shelves full of all the latest best-selling business books. And I thought, that's weird. Why would a bankrupt company have all the best books and hire all the best consultants and listen to all the best speakers? I was just curious as to what happened. So these are the complaints I was hearing. So I was asked by several students, could this be biological? Because I had published The Code of the Executive, which was based on samurai training 700 years ago. And they had the same issues. It's like, wait a minute, these issues have been going on for centuries. And here we are, 35,000 business books published every year, and we have a failure rate of 90%. So if you go on Google Scholar, you can do your own research on that. But it's like, wait a minute, what's wrong with this picture? What? So they said, could it be biological? And that's that. I thought that was a great question. So that's when I began looking to see what was happening that's driving our behavior for thousands of years, with the same problems we've had always being there. And how is it that some companies win and some companies lose? And that's what took it forward. And I started looking at evolution. I started looking at evolutionary psychology. I started running into some brilliant people that were helping me. Jillian Feely Harnick at Hopkins in anthropology, Dr. David Buss, who runs the evolutionary psychology lab at Austin now. I just started running into some really brilliant people, and it became a fun journey for me to spend this time to look at the biological evolutionary elements of leadership and what really works and what doesn't. So it explained the failure rates. It was interesting. It was from anthropology, not the business press, that allowed me to see why management theory and leadership fail. And it's not because we don't have the right techniques or the right style of leadership or the right, business theory. It has to do with something else that has been part of our species for many years, since Alexander the Great was trying to conquer more market share, since we moved out of Africa, heading northeast and west and leading humans forward. The same patterns have been there all along. It's just that we don't really teach it. So when we started applying it in companies, we saw balance sheets improve. We started seeing sales double, triple, in some cases 10 times sales within a few years. So we knew that we had ran into something, and that's when I started having a fan club of tens of thousands of CEOs wanting to keep up with this research. And we've tested it. We ended up, fortunately, had CEOs that were, kind enough to let us test these elements in their companies. So it was a good partnership. And I've just ran into some of the most amazing people, and I hope to continue doing that.
So what are these secrets that you figured out?
Can't tell you. One of the primal foundations of the model is that we throw a lot of tools at problems. So when I look at any business book, it's like, okay, we all want results. So great. If you're a CEO or an executive in any company or a business owner, you want results. It's not that complicated. But how will we start getting results or attempting to produce them are by looking at the elements of what do I got to do to get better results and how do I do it? And we have got tens of thousands of books on how to do that. What do I do and how do I do it? Well, you need goals, you need objectives, you need good processes, you need metrics and plans and, a culture and, go to all these things, right? And so I put this chart up when I'm doing this workshop for management teams, and I have them, fill it out, and they're like, yeah, this is their to-do list. This is your to-do list. This is your average day at the office. What do I got to do? How do we do it? But the problem is that we have some great books on how to help us, but the results aren't happening. And this is where the anthropologist said, Don, you're an idiot. You're looking at the wrong things. And it was like, what do you mean? They said, you're just looking at your tools. And that is what made this shift. All these things are tools, but tools don't produce results. And that then allowed me to see, why was there a 90% failure rate of management theory? It was because we're just focused on the tools, but if the tools don't alter human decision, they're a total waste. So it was seeing that what we were missing is leadership is really there to try to alter and align the behavior of humans. And that includes their decisiveness, the decisions they make. So you can throw more books and tools and systems and processes and all this at a group of humans, but if it doesn't alter their decisions, then you've wasted everything. And that led us then to what drives human decision, human behavior. And we went back through looking at Alexander and Cleopatra and Gandhi and Hannibal, Caesar, Genghis Khan. It was clearly what they were doing was altering the beliefs of their people. So belief management became the missing link. It became the one thing that was missing in management theory, because we weren't teaching leaders that first, forget the tools. How are you going to manage the beliefs of your humans? Because that is how you're going to drive performance. That's how you're going to get your results. That's how you're going to make money. And so it was obvious from the ancients that this was how you did it, but for some reason we lost it when it came to modern management teaching. So that's what led my research into different areas, and books like, High Altitude Leadership.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. So as I think back to the leaders of the olden time, the story that always comes through is the person who brings the bad news dies. And so nobody wants to bring bad news. And in today's leadership, nobody tells the leader he's naked, right? No one provides the feedback, and you create these silos that really prevent communication and reality from happening. Different cultures behave differently in these particular situations. I think the industry that's best at this is the airline industry. Because every time something goes wrong, they do study it, they correct, they make it better. And they've actually had to deal with pilots from cultures where the co-pilot won't challenge the pilot when they're running out of gas, right? Or fuel. But yet I still think it happens in American business where nobody will raise their hand and talk about the elephant in the room.
Weak teams have a hard time doing that. When we're working with clients, that is one of the things that come up, because there's two dimensions in leading an organization. And that is, it's kind of like you're going into battle with a sword. You need both edges sharp. And the one edge is, do we have the strategy to win? That's a whole other conversation, because we're teaching strategy wrong. But do we have the strategy to win? But the other edge of the sword is do we have the organization to execute that strategy? So if either one of those are dull, you're going to have a problem, because you can have a great strategy, but you can't execute, or you can execute very well, but your strategy is flawed. And so you need both of them in hand. So a lot of times when we're developing strategic positioning of a company and for growth, the other thing we have to do is also get the team up to the same level. In other words, for execution. And part of execution is the ability to be brave and honorable, the ability to suffer together, as an example, the ability to share a common belief. And in that domain, communication is there, because then the CEO wants and demands to hear what's going on, because, the greatest generals want to know what's going on. They don't want to be taken out at the last day, realizing, geez, I had no idea we were losing until the last day, And so great leaders, I think, don't want to suppress feedback. Their biggest struggle, their good ones, is how am I going to get it? Because generally people are afraid to talk sometimes, And so they have to figure out, well, how do I find out what's really happening? But generally strong teams don't have that problem. And they can be creative. If a CEO doesn't feel like they have one, they can be creative. It's not impossible. But you're right. A lot of the autopsies we've done on dead companies, it's not uncommon to find a CEO who wasn't given a straight answer.
So a lot of times what I hear talked about today are two different things. One is mission, vision, purpose. And the other is the mindsets. Is what you're talking about kind of roll into that? Is that am I using different words for the same concepts? Do they go together, totally separate? Because I would think from a leadership standpoint, if you haven't been clear on what your vision is and what you're doing and why you're doing it, right? Always start with the why, and having the mindset that it's doable and that you'll figure it out. is this the same concepts worded differently, or are these totally different concepts?
They're related. In fact, the term mindset was created by Lou Tice about 50 years ago in his research. So he created the term mindset and what that all meant. And so it was a new thing at the time. And that's where the Pacific Institute was born. And it's funny because I've been fortunate enough to run into some of the executives at the Pacific Institute, and now we're looking at doing some work together because our research is parallel. You know, the late Lou Tice is no longer with us, but what he started back with mindset, and he started with find your why. I mean, that all started half a century ago with Lou. So what we're doing is building on that, and so I'm having a lot of fun working with Mark Banciera. It would be a great podcast interview for you too if you want to use them. In fact, we're going to talk to him shortly. And so this is, and so this mindset thing really was Lou's capacity to see what is this belief pattern? What is this thinking pattern that we have? Now, when you look at creating mission, vision, purpose, all that, people have to believe in that too. But here's the difference. A lot of times people apply those concepts as tools. Yeah, we have a mission statement. It's hanging on the wall. Yeah, we have a purpose. It's on our website. Yeah, we did the why exercise. It's all tools, totally lost how they should be occurring in the mindset, in the beliefs of the people, you see. And so that's where in the research, we saw all these dead companies that had these great mission statements and great purpose statements and great why statements. So why are they dead? What happened? And we found out what was missing is first, they have to be built on strategic performance. They have to have some strategy for winning. So if the concept doesn't capture what winning means and how you're going to do it, then basically all you have is a feel-good statement. And a lot of companies die with feel-good statements. The other thing, too, is we found that missions and visions aren't enough because throughout history, and this is very politically incorrect, but we see it work 100% of the time, is these statements don't induce the level of willingness to suffer and sacrifice. So we ended up bringing in a new concept, or an old concept, that we stole from the Vikings because they knew a few things about market share development. So we call it the compelling saga. In other words, what's the language that inspires passion for something in the future that's so formidable that you create a belief of need? We need each other to achieve this. And we're willing to achieve it so much that we will suffer and sacrifice together. Now, that's a statement. Now, you get a human group that needs each other to achieve something ahead of them, and they're willing to suffer and sacrifice to achieve it, and you have got now a great execution team. And so we started teaching this and putting this into practice the past 15 years, maybe longer now, 20 years, and it's been an amazing magnifier of more than a touchy-feely statement. Okay, and I get it. Like, there's a lot of suffering and sacrifice. Wait a minute. This is the happy employee movement. We want employees to be happy. We don't want them to be sad. And I'm like, there's so many dead companies with happy employees. Like, this is what I found out in the research. You know what really makes employees happy? Winning. Winning makes employees happy. They want to be part of a winning team, and great employees are willing to participate in winning when there's a leader who they believe in and they trust, getting back to those words earlier, and they're up against something ahead that they want to have happen. I just did this great blog article that got a lot of press, and I'm running a lot of blogs now on myth busting up management myths. And one of the ones is, well, like, why do people follow assholes? And it was a great research project because I was like, wait a minute, we're not talking about this, but we should be talking about it. because we have all these great leader behaviors. We have what style of leadership every year. There's a new book on you got to be this style leader or that style leader. And I'm finding out like some of these dead companies with all these great leadership styles. You know what's missing is results. So maybe we're teaching leadership wrong. Maybe we should work back into the style once you understand what the results are. Because when our work started being used at Apple, I was curious when Steve Jobs had died, and they did movies and books about Steve's leadership style. What did they say about it?
He was an asshole.
Exactly. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. Why isn't there a revolution right now on leadership to understand how does an asshole create the most powerful company in the world? How does a guy who violates all the stuff that we're teaching in our management schools, our leadership programs, he just violates them and he creates the most powerful company in the world? Why has no one asked this question? So we thought, well, let's ask. And what we found out is he wasn't alone. I mean, there was a whole list of, General Patton was an asshole. They just published that Mother Teresa was an asshole. What? Mother Teresa? So anyway, I go through this whole list. I'm thinking, okay, what's really happening? And I found out that we're teaching leadership wrong. Followers aren't following you. You can be an asshole. They're not following you. They're following the compelling saga. Gets back to the Viking thing. They're following the story you represent. They're following where you're going. And if it's inspiring enough, they want to follow. They'll suffer with you, even if you're an asshole. Now, I'm not saying you got to be an asshole, but that explains why these assholes create these great companies. And we should teach about that.
So one of the things that I have seen and learned is people have these compelling visions and statements on the wall and everything else. But if everyone turns around, nobody can tell me what's on the wall. Yeah. Second, they don't hire to their values. They hire for skills, and they hire assholes who happen to be really good at a skill, but don't fit in with everyone else. And everybody then starts fighting and creating their little fiefdoms in the different divisions and the silos of the company so that nobody is working together. But when you start to say, these are our values, this is our mission, are you interested in coming on this journey? Because if you're not, we're not hiring you. And when you start modeling the behavior and start showing it and start rewarding it and stop cleaning out the people who don't fit, things do dramatically change. I don't, have you ever looked at the Savannah Bananas?
The Savannah Bananas. And I never heard of that.
They're a minor league baseball team. They've got an ESPN contract. They make more money than some major league teams do. And when I say make more money, I mean they actually are profitable, not just revenue, but they've got a culture that is dramatically different. When you take your kids there, it's pay one price. There's no pay extra for your hot dog. Like there's no pay extra for the parking. They've turned all their people into entertainers because they realized, and if you ask me, baseball is very, very boring to me, but they've turned baseball into an entertainment. People are lined up to work for them. Like they don't have to worry about hiring. They don't have to worry about any of these things because they've created this massive culture around a company that when they sat down and ran the numbers, there was no way they could be profitable because minor league baseball just doesn't normally make money. But they reverse engineered it. And they're my classic example of a standout company. The guy who owns it, he wears a yellow tuxedo, right? People want to follow him. People want to have fun. They do crazy stuff. And they just keep iterating, trying, failing, getting better. And it's just fun to watch.
You know, you said something that is interesting because I have this book for entrepreneurs coming out in October called Winners and Losers. And one of the things, it was the failing and getting up and the learning that really tended to differentiate the elements. So I think that's an area of leadership we don't teach as well. So your point, I think, is important because when I went to look at these successful entrepreneurs and I did a biography and a study of their history, it was really not a history of successes like we're teaching. Well, to be a successful entrepreneur, you got to do this, you got to do that. No, it was really a string of failures. It was total string of failures. And it's what they learned in the failing that became great. So I think we don't learn how to lose powerfully. But if we can learn how to lose powerfully, we can do things like what you're describing this guy did.
So when I coach soccer, we had a simple rule. We either win or we learn.
Yeah.
And that was the key. So if somebody is going to score more points than us, let's figure out how they did it. Let's learn their secrets and let's implement. And that's the reason I think I became very successful at coaching is I got beat a lot and I learned from all these different teams their one thing. Well, what I did was I took the 10-1 things and I taught the kids the 10-1 things. And so they were unstoppable because they could do a multitude of things in different ways that nobody else had mastered, so to speak. And they had a toolkit to go to. This doesn't work. Try this, try that. In these situations, they knew how to react and what to do. And it worked. It worked. It didn't. Try something else. And that was the other thing. We never talked about failure. You know, if you scored against the goalie, it's because the 10 of you in front of the goalie screwed up. Don't blame the guy in the back.
That's it.
That's it. What other ahas came out of all your research that aren't, let's say, well-known or maybe counterintuitive?
Oh, geez. There's so many. I tried to put a few in this book. I think one of them is we weren't teaching strategy right. You know, I was at fault because I was teaching it as an analytical process. You know, we got to do a SWOT analysis, this analysis. But I was curious as to why small companies would start up in an industry and all the management consultants would say they won't make it. All the industry experts, all the thought leaders said, well, they're doing it wrong. They're violating best practices. So they're never going to make it. And this company rises up and dominates their entire market. And I'm wondering, how did that happen? How do you win and dominate a market? By violating best practices, by doing everything the opposite of all the top consultants say you should be doing. And when I got into it, I began to realize that we're not teaching strategy right. We're not teaching it correctly. We're not teaching it in a proper way, because throughout history, strategy was really not about the analysis. It was about the intuition. So that was one of the big ahas, is that, you know, how you out-intuit an enemy's moves is how you win. You use the analysis later for tactics, but I think we've confused tactics with strategy. And I tell CEOs, like I'll do these CEO workshops or these management team workshops, and I'll say, you know, do you really have a strategic plan or is it a tactical plan? And they all of a sudden their eyes open like, oh my God, we have a tactical plan. I said, yeah, that's why you're not securing the markets and the growth you want. And so it moves into a different area, because when you think about it, beliefs, which of course includes this intuitive element in this dimension, is an art. And art's hard. You know, analysis is easy. We've got tools for that. And we get seduced by those tools and they take us down. You know, we have logic and reason and textbooks and formulas and equations, but in art, there's nothing, you know, and that's why art is a dangerous place. Getting back to risk again, it's a dangerous place, but that's where strategy lives. And the companies that we've been able to work with and the ones that we've observed that have been so successful, it was some intuitive reinterpretation of their beliefs about where's the real market, how do we really segment it, who's the real enemy, how do we outmaneuver. And that's not really an analytical question.
It seems like you've learned a lot, but I get the feeling there's no one book of yours that has it all captured in one place.
No. I mean, I do have a lot of audiences that come and they say, oh, geez, we're going to get all this in a book. I said, well, I haven't written it yet, but I got a piece here, I got a piece there. In the entrepreneur book coming out, Winners and Losers, I do have about 3 or 4 myths being exposed. And one of these days, I have to have somebody just record my 3-hour workshop and say, just publish that. But then I'd have to change it because I'm learning new things all the time. I'm meeting brilliant people and I'm making mistakes, you know, and I'm learning from those. So it's an evolving thing.
Well, you wrote a book with AI. AI can do that for you.
that was a fun project. That was a fun project. And yeah. AI is just a tool. You know what I mean? People say, well, wait a minute, are you afraid of AI? I'm like, no, it saved me a lot of time because I could I could go to the Hopkins Library down the street and I could spend 2 or 3 weeks researching a subject. And, or I can hire a grad student to do it for me and spend maybe 2 or 3 days reviewing the findings. Or I can go to AI and in 20 minutes get everything. So it really saves me weeks of time. And I'm getting older. I don't have weeks to waste anymore.
I very much understand that sentiment. How did we get to a place, or have we always been in this place where, it like starting back at the beginning, right? We all go to school to learn about money, but nobody teaches us money. We go to grad school, college to live a great life, but nobody teaches us how to live a great life, right? We go to business school to learn strategy and all these things, but we're not learning what we really need to learn. Has it always been lost? Has it been coveted by a few? Because I know when I was a kid, knowledge was gold. Today, knowledge is everywhere. It's the discernment to know what's right and, what's true is much more the case. How do we okay, I'm getting older. I want the shortcut to find the right answers here so I can just go do it. Or do I have to go fail a bunch? Is that what you're telling me?
Well, I tell you, failure is really an incredible experience. I was writing this on the samurai books on death, and it's like, well, it's kind of morbid. It says, no, we have to die every day. Like, what are those beliefs holding you back? Because those beliefs have to die to free you to get to the next level. And this ancient concept has produced amazing results, people in my audiences, and they call to me like a year later, Don, I went back and I changed this. I was stuck on this. So I think the element that we need to look at here is not about all the information, because there's plenty out there, but I think it's about who we are, and in that our beliefs, what holds us back and how we continue to free ourselves. And as you said, yeah, it's those elements of making mistakes. And my philosophy as I've gotten older is I have so many more mistakes to make and so little time left. And so this is what we should enjoy, is that journey of learning and growing.
And that's what I'm on. I'm on that journey of learning and growing. I just find that there are 2 ways to learn from failure. I can learn from my failure, or it's much, much easier if I learn from your failure and the failure of all those people who fell off the mountain, because it is just a little bit easier on me. And so if I can learn from others and see what's right and wrong and get that discernment and then adapt it to me, makes life a little bit easier.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
I don't think I have a secret. I think I'm still trying to figure that one out, because for me, I'm kind of a contrarian. It's like, I don't want to be abundant just yet. I still want to have the drive to accumulate knowledge, wisdom, learn from others. And yet I know there's philosophers that argue with me with that. But my secret is to always keep open to learning and realizing that what I'm currently believing may not be what I need to get me to the next level. I may need to give that up.
What got you here won't get you there. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Not to trust.
That's surprising. Is that trust but verify, or is it?
Yeah, it's exactly right. Yeah, I had brought in so many people to help me scale and leverage my research and get it out there. And I've had to get rid of 5 teams over the years that they thought they were good. They had a note from their mother, but I violated what I'm teaching, and I'm stupid. I didn't check them. I didn't simulate for them. I didn't, how many companies have you started? and sold. I mean, that tells me a little bit about you. And so that's why I love working with the Pacific Institute now, is because they've been doing this. They've trained 7 million people. So with us, it's easy because it's something we both have some track record in. But that was my mistake. I learned a lot from that. Trust but verify.
It's funny how that is. Even the best of us, right? If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
You don't know everything.
Yeah. Good luck with them listening to that.
Keep learning. Because I was there. I knew everything when I was 18. I knew everything.
I think that literally, every 18-year-old male has that belief.
Well,
some of us have learned as we've aged that we were foolish. Some of us still haven't. If people would like to learn more, find the wealth of your knowledge and information, what's the best way for them to learn more from you?
The website that I'm trying to keep everything condensed on my blog and everything else, and the work that we're going to be doing with the Pacific Institute is SAGA Leadership, just like the Viking word saga, SAGA.com, SAGAleadership.com. And we're going to try to get some more free classes out there for everybody. But this book is being launched, and so we're going to be launching like a pre-purchase thing and get access to all this stuff now instead of waiting. So I've just been really blessed to have some great people around me, and I'm going to keep doing it. I'll keep upgrading the website and our information and having some fun. Let's have fun and learn.
It's always about have fun and learn. That is very much the key. Thank you so much for joining us today. What beliefs do you need to kill today in order to grow? As Don said, we need to die to limiting beliefs daily. As we discussed earlier, having an experienced guide or Sherpa can make climbing your mountain of achievement safer and faster. Don't be afraid to ask for help, but always trust and verify if their experience fits your journey. Do you have your compelling saga, a vision and a purpose story so powerful that others want to join you and help you to achieve your greatness together? By the way, if you enjoyed the story of the Savannah Bananas baseball team, check out my conversation with their co-owner, Emily Cole. It's on the Profit Answer Man podcast. I'll put a link in the show notes. At the end of the day, you got to try new things, fail, and learn in order to grow wiser. Edison supposedly failed 1,000 times before perfecting the light bulb. Failing powerfully is critical. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Next week, we have on Dr. Lavella, and we are going to talk about the gut-brain connection and optimizing your microbiome and health. She's an expert in this area, and I look forward to the conversation. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.